Hello and welcome to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. This is your host, Ashley from Ashley Taylor Wellness. On this podcast, we talk about all things beauty, health, wellness, and optimization. Being a high maintenance hippie represents not being boxed in, as I strongly believe that one size does not fit all. I'm a nurse turned coach, and I have learned so much about both conventional and alternative options, and I want to help you expand your options. I'm here to inspire you to learn new ways to improve your quality of life and to take your power back. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started.
And rewire your response to the trigger. And people walk out of those 5-day intensives with, they can go into a moldy building, or they can go into New York City with high EMF, and they rewire it in a very short amount of time. So it is real, and it's a signal that's unique to your supercomputer that's sitting in your brain. So it's multifactorial.
I'm glad you brought that up, because after I cleaned up my lifestyle after 2018 and I made all of these changes, now I'm in a position where I have one glass of alcohol and my body's like, no. And I'm like, but I did all this work so that I could feel better.
Yeah.
And then I looked at it differently. I'm like, oh, my body's trying to give me a message. And I was so toxic before, just in my lifestyle. It's kind of like if you're used to drinking a 12-pack of beer, and then you don't drink for a while and then you have one, you're going to feel it. It's almost like my bucket was so full that it didn't seem to give me the signal in the same way that it did. And so now I look at it as a blessing. Whenever my body is giving me a headache, or whenever I have any type of symptom pop up, I realize my body's trying to tell me something. So what is that message? And I also believe it's a superpower. A lot of people think it's a nuisance, but I'd rather get the message than not and deal with a much bigger problem later.
Yeah. You just weren't tapped in like you are now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like I'm so sensitive. I can feel vitamin C. I know this sounds crazy. I can feel like if I take like a nebulize some glutathione for a little bit, I was like, oh, do you guys feel that's great? People are like, I don't feel anything. I'm so sensitive to stuff in a good way. Like I'm just tuned in to my body. I'm like, I'm aware of the subtle energies. You can totally take that too far. The best thing I ever did, I got out of all the support groups for mold and Lyme and autoimmunity. And it's just like, I'm choosing. There was a point when I had learned everything I needed to know. And then I'm just going back. And then I'm going back for punishment. Then I just want to sit in the stew of the other people who can't get better. And it's nothing against those groups. They're good for a little minute. But after that, it's like, you're going to see there's a lot of spiraling. There's a lot of looping. There's a lot of looping in the brain. There's a lot of the words that come with the stories that people create. If you really just pull it back, and this happens in relationships too, right? How many times you get into a thing with your partner and you're like, if we want to have a conversation about the facts of this event, let's say to the facts, but we'll go into story. We're like, did you just pull in something from 4 years ago? Where are we going? Because I want to put a container on it so we can be effective. And that does not exist. I've never found a group like that ever, because it's really focused on the disease. And there's a lot of like, even the cancer support groups, like I love them, but man, are they dark? I can't be in them. And I don't think it doesn't help me. I can go in and I can do like I can talk to people for a minute, but then I got to get out. And that's just me protecting my energy.
Absolutely. I have heard the same thing about cancer support groups, and it doesn't mean to bypass your feelings, but if you are marinating in a very low vibrational energy, people who are terrified, it may not be supportive to your healing. I think what I would do in any situation where I'm struggling financially, with health, I want to look for positive examples, because I know I'm probably not the first person to deal with X problem, and give my brain evidence that it is possible, which is why I'm so grateful for you sharing. Not only have you survived, but thriving. And I'm still just having a hard time getting over this biological age, because you look amazing. How do you feel?
I feel great. I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. I really do. Whatever you want to call it, whatever label, it's Lyme, it's autoimmune, the joint pain for me and the discomfort has been, it's been one of the hardest things. I'm going to pair it right up with the abdominal adhesions. For years and years, Ashley, I laid on a tennis ball. People are going out to party with their friends. I did thousands of hours of laying on a ball, stretching my belly. That's what I had to do. Thousands. There's so many family vacations and parties and things where people are sitting down, they're ordering nachos and tacos and margaritas. And I'm like, no, I gotta bring chicken in a bag, or I gotta have a can of tuna fish or a can of sardines, no tuna, the can of sardines. And I'm gonna go open somewhere else. Somebody doesn't have to smell the sardines. But I've made so many sacrifices to be able to do what I do today. And that's just like, it's all a choice. It's not convenient. It's not always fun. We haven't talked about this. I did some pretty outside of the box stuff to be where I'm at today, to say I'm better than I've ever been. I had bought an Ozone machine, and I had learned how to, by practicing on an orange. My mother's who's a nurse, retired nurse. She was like, here's how you puncture a vein, and it self-administered ozone therapy, which is a oxidative therapy, which helps to neutralize mold, pathogens, viruses, as well as flood the body with oxygen, which is, that's a tenet of being well. Not super safe, but I did it, it's as well as rectal ozone insufflations, which again, this is a medical treatment in Cuba for cancer that shows like decent efficacy. And I know that it's probably, whether people have heard this or not, we think about the ozone layer and you don't want to breathe ozone gas. Well, there's a therapeutic benefit, stuff like stem cell injections. I've ate parasite eggs that help to repopulate the gut and rebalance my microbiome, which I had lost a lot of heritage strains going through chemotherapy. And I did antibiotics for 3 years straight for Lyme.
Wow.
3
For Lyme, yeah.
years. My microbiome was so decimated, beyond. Like people are like, where's your microbiome? And I built that back up, over time. But it was ordering parasites from Europe and eating them. I mean, there was crazy stuff I did. You name it, I've done it. Stem cell injections, hyperbaric chambers. And I live in a house where there's 3 PEMF devices. One on the couch is one on my bed. I have a full body red light panel in the other room. I have a sauna and a cold plunge. Biofeedback. I have a hydrogen machine for antioxidant capabilities, selective antioxidant. So all of it, it's all laid in. It's not extra. It's just like when I'm sitting in a computer, I might be hooked up to a thing doing some type of a therapy. There's a cheap equivalent of the PEMF therapy, which is adding electrons to the system, which is just walking outside barefoot, which we don't do anymore. So there's a free natural equivalent, but because I was in the state I was in, I've done a lot of outside of the box stuff. So I do want to say that too. I didn't just change my diet and call it a day.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of ozone therapy. That actually was the one thing that gave me relief from all of the hives. 2 treatments, I would say it was almost gone. So it was incredible. Wow. I did that 2018 and I've done it since. We also have an ozone generator at home. I don't give myself IVs. I don't know how people do that. I'm a nurse, but still, like, I don't even like to give myself sub-Q shots in the belly. But anyhow, a lot of these things people see as a cost, or they feel like, well, if I can't have all of those devices, then I can't be healthy. And just like you said, there is almost always a natural version of these things. Sometimes you're paying for convenience. And biohacking to me would be more about how to optimize the body. We live in this modern world. And to me, health is living in harmony with nature. That includes my circadian rhythm. I worked night shift for many years. Like, I learned how important sleep is and just all of these foundational things. So what are some of the free things that you think people do not prioritize that are very, very important, regardless of what health condition you're dealing with?
Yeah, I think like my list, generally, you got to move. This is the one thing where if you look at the obesity rates in our country, it's not about mitigating fat off the body. It's looking at the body and be like, why is my body metabolically resistant? Am I moving enough? Do I do 10,000 steps a day outside? Do I lift heavy things? Do I understand the mechanics of the body? I was in the gym this morning and I was just like, and it's a really nice gym with really like, it's like hoity-toity gym in Austin, Texas. And I was looking around and I was like, man, people they don't understand the idea of kinetically building strength in the body. It's all aesthetic in a gym. I look around, I'm like, because I look at it as like my visual field from learning what I learned, whether it was international sports science or functional patterns, is that people are like, they're setting themselves up for like a link to be broken in the kinetic chain because they're not training as a system. It can be anything, but you got to move. Your movement is going to inform how your lymphatic system flows. Most doctors get 2 hours in a doctorate program on the lymph system. The only time lymph was mentioned to me was, hey, we got to cut out those lymph nodes. Too bad about your lymph system. When in reality, the lymph is stopping the cancer from progressing throughout the body. And that system, there's 3 times as much lymphatic fluid as there is blood, which is your drainage system.
Mm-hmm.
It is how your whole immune system would get to any organ. So if it ain't flowing, if you have a stagnated lymph, your healing will be very limited. And for the moldies and the limeys out there, think about all the herbal treatments and the ozone therapy and the cell core and the yada, yada, yada to kill.
Mm-hmm.
If your drainage system is not functioning, all you're doing is you're having all these dead spirochetes and all these mold spores floating around the lymphatics, triggering your immune system. It doesn't matter if they're dead or alive. It's almost worse. They're just floating around the system, informing your supercomputer that you still have an infection. Again, there's very little talk about that. Been a huge lymph nut since January. I got this system called Flowpresso, and it's a full body.
Amazing. I've tried it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm working with this company now because I was like, this is a game changer for lymph. Game changer. A practitioner only tool, but it's like, movement, lymph, you have to flood the body with electrons. We talked about Otto Warburg and the cell having voltage and having enough charge. And that's just being outside and being barefoot or laying on the beach, going to the ocean. And then that is a free therapy. We talked about light. Red light therapy, you get a great portion of your red light therapy from sunrise till 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. It helps to reset that circadian rhythm. It actually helps amplify the protective powers of the melanin in your skin, which is going to help you mitigate skin cancer. Crazy that we're like, no, don't go out in the sun. Cover yourself with, sunblock. Don't let those UV rays into the melanin that's converting it to energy for your body. It's wild that it's almost like all misinformation that we're dealing with. So when people get sick, when people have cancer, when people have all these chronic conditions, it actually makes perfect sense. The other one I'd say is free is we're in these little 72-degree controlled boxes that are a comfortable temperature. It's like, man, your body was made to regulate temperatures that are pretty extreme. We're seeing all these people jump in ice for a couple minutes. Well, that's supernatural, and in the Netherlands, they set their little babies outside in the snow and the ice, and they let them do that to bolster their immune system. These are the natural things. So it's like the movement and the lymph and the light and the hormetic stressors of temperature. You said sleep hygiene. You got to know about your sleep environment, your sleep hygiene. What do you do before bed to wind down? All of these things. Then I think the last thing I'd say for free, how do you detox the nervous system? How are you letting go of the stresses of the day? As a genetically wired entrepreneur, I love dopamine. I love people. I love speaking. I love engaging with people. It's hard for me to get off the dopamine rocket at the end of this day sometimes. I'm just so I'm like, what's next? So I got to take time of stillness. I have to do breath work. I have to, maybe it's some type of a yoga class. Maybe it's just walking by myself for a half hour outside with no stimulus. And it's hard for me.
It is. It's hard for me too. It's the hardest thing of all the doing activities, no problem. The being activities, a little bit harder. So what am I avoiding? And that's a powerful question I ask a lot of my coaching clients. What am I avoiding here? So as far as things that you can purchase, if you want to invest in your health, and that's how I look at it, it's an investment. I'm not a big fan of spending time in the hospital as a patient. So I want to do everything I can to be a strong, resilient, older adult. Like you mentioned with the gym. I mean, I'm all about looking good, if whatever that means to you.
Right.
But I also don't want to look good in a hospital bed. I want to not fall. I want to be independent. And we don't think about that stuff. So building muscle is very important to me. Practicing balance and stability emotionally, but also physically. That's something that is free. And, we don't think about that. The beach is one of the most healing places for me. It costs money to get there, but it's a gift from nature. So as far as things that you've invested in, what are your favorites? I'll share some of mine, but I'd love to hear what you're most passionate about.
Yeah. God, what are my favorites? I mean, I love that. The Ozone machine is great. I use Simply O3 Micah's product.
Same.
It's awesome. And it's cute and it looks like it doesn't look weird. Like you can leave it out on a shelf in a living room. You're like, oh, what's that cool bubbler thing? I absolutely love that. I love the Flowpresso, albeit it's a practitioner device, but I'm really lucky to have one in my home.
In your home? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, super, super lucky. And they're not terrible. They're under $9,000. It's not awful. I know people like $9,000, but as biohacking equipment goes, I've bought some really, really expensive stuff. So it's quite affordable for a practitioner to use in their business, which is what it's intended for, just because you need to be buttoned into it. Other things that I absolutely love, I love Ampcoil. It was my gateway into PEMF and frequency therapy, which it's a Tesla coil that helps add electrons to the body. I have gotten so much value from that. I just had a rip-in flu last week. I mean, I was down. I was down for 6 days, crazy bone pain. And out of all the things I had, that was the only, I would run, there's a program on there called Wellness 2020, and my pain was gone for 2 hours. I mean, like bad bone pain. Whenever I get a flu for some reason or a virally thing, it took the pain away and I could sleep. It was like, oh, this is crazy. No pills, no medication. Like it's a copper coil that's giving my body electrons and sending a signal or a sine wave to the body to calm down. Absolutely love that device. Amy Killen.
I don't think so.
Amy Killen, she's like the super duper stem cell hormone therapy female sexual health doctor.
Okay.
She speaks at Bulletproof all the time. Her mom had broken a hip. She asked me, she's like, what do I do? What do I do? I was like, oh, I'm going to send you a MagnaWave. MagnaWave is like a PEMF device, but it's like super powerful. It's like a Pulse Centers of America. They're technically made for horses and animals, but I sent it to her, for a month and her mom did great. It's like the high powered PEMF devices. If you ever have a bone break, because we're not going to do, if you really want to look up some terrible, terrible science, look up the science behind Boniva, which is supposed to help women with osteoporosis, which actually like, it's almost like filling in your bone with like fake plaster. Like it makes your bones weaker and you have a higher propensity to break, but on a scan, it looks stronger. But this is a drug we market and we push to people we do commercials for, as opposed to the FDA approved device, which is PEMF therapy, which will actually can help a non-union fracture, like a bone that has not healed for even years, 6 years, will it start to heal again. And the device doesn't do that, but the device is signaling the body and your little osteoblast in your bone to start growing together again. And it can grow back stronger. So that's another one. It's like, and they're investments, but I was like, man, they're life-saving. Like, the stats of having a fall and breaking a hip when you're 65. You want to talk about a risk factor for ending your life. Like that's a big one. Falls. And then I have a cold plunge set up outside. I built it. I used a Penguin chiller back when Penguin didn't make, now they make chillers for ice. They make ice bath conversion kits. But 3 years ago, I like bought a pump in Home Depot and I got a filtration system from Home Depot and plugged it into the ice barrel. And I have a barrel that's ready to go at 40 degrees, like every day. Like I wake up, I get in that bucket and it's like, I never want to do it, but it's a great willpower building thing. Yeah. I just love it. If I'm ever in a bad mood, if I'm ever like, if I want to get over myself and I'm like pouty, go get in that bucket. You won't feel like that.
Yeah.
You will not feel like that. So those are the big ones that I use a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. Cold plunging. I don't do it all the time just because I don't know how that would affect a female. I do think males and females are different. That's controversial, I suppose to say, but it's still something I enjoy. And I totally agree. If I'm in a bad, funky mood, I get out and I just feel like it's a sense of accomplishment maybe, but
yeah,
it's amazing. So I do it mostly for the mental benefits.
I'm going to be doing an episode on ice baths and cancer because there's a lot of anecdotal experiences in which people's tumors have gone away. There's case studies now. Obviously, some of the work that Wim Hof did on the immune system, and your immune system is what fights cancer every day. I think in the next few years, I think you'll see them leaning into that work and that data collection around cancer and cold therapy. I really do. I really believe in it. I would never make that claim to say, treat your cancer with cold. But if you really are looking to reset the immune system and the nervous system, what a hard reset. I kind of look at Flowpresso like that. It's like a Control-Alt-Delete. Your body knows how to heal, it knows how to beat cancer, it knows how to self-correct until we lose the way. it's really a process of remembering. I don't look at any of the devices I mentioned as doing anything aside from bolstering the pathway that already exists.
Yes.
To my knowledge, they're not making up a new pathway. They're just amplifying the things that your body already does. It might sound like a compliance claim, but it's really my body is what heals my immune system. I got to fire it up.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
That's a really great way to put it, because a lot of people say, oh, if I use this, is it going to heal me? And what we're doing with these practices and these interventions is helping support the body so that the body can do what it needs to do. It's not that it's an end all be all, but if, let's say, your mitochondrial function is terrible, then is the body going to be able to heal fully? So yeah, finding different healing opportunities and different tools. And I don't use all of my biohacks every single day. I just am able to say, what would serve my body today? And, fine tune. And you have mentioned in different words, but listening to your body, like you're very good at knowing what's going on. Like you can feel things, and more is not always better with these changes.
No. And I think, if I walk around, like the last big biohacking event I was at, I was feeling really disenchanted with it. I was feeling really overwhelmed. I was feeling empathetic for everybody there looking and seeking. I was like, man, good luck. Because we're looking at the marketing for each like little product and each supplement and each genetic testing. And the Biomed Center, again, in Scottsdale, it brought it all back to me like a framework that I could understand. Like, not everybody is going to be good for every technology, and they should be used in an order of operations, which will be unique to that person.
Yes.
And that's why you need you need a coach. You cannot heal by yourself for multiple reasons. I think you need to be seen. You need a space holder. There's the quantum effect of being seen and how the experiment changes when someone is witnessing, whether it's a particle turning into a wave, or it's a person that wants to be held. You can't do it alone, but you do need energetic therapies, right? The body is an energetic body, which dictates a chemical reaction. The energetic body is first. The light body is first, light particles. Then we're going to get a physical manifestation of disease. That's further down the road. So that's where I'm something like almost like a homeopathic. That's exactly what a homeopathic is doing. It's interrupting a signal that the body already kind of knew was there. A very, 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 very subtle signal. That's what frequency does. When people say frequency therapy, we talk about red light therapy. It is signaling the release of nitric oxide in the cell to make more energy. But you really do need a framework, and the body can totally be overwhelmed. And if you're sensitive with mold or Lyme, I think some of the worst, because I heard this all the time, and I still do work with Ampcoil on their advisory board. I did thousands of phone calls with people that were dying or their children were dying. And I say dying, I mean, from their experience, they're just not living, they're bedbound, they're not going to school, failure to launch. What's wrong with my child? The experience will never be this. It's like everybody wanted a promise that, this device will do this for my kid, or I need to invest in this. This is my last $8,000. And it's the hardest conversation to have, because no one will know. You'll never know. I can tell you that a dramatic number of people benefit by using PEMF and frequency therapy. We all want it to be like, I want the Petri dish data. Well, your home ain't a Petri dish. Yeah. There's cofactors, there's your relationship dynamic, there's everything that's going on in that child this generation and last. Nobody knows how it's going to turn out. So a sense of confidence, understanding that, yes, you need electrons. Yes, you need oxygen. Yes, you need time in nature. Yes, you need off-gassing of the immune system. Yes, you need lymph. How are you supporting those systems? And so we can look at it more pragmatically like that and be like, here's how you'll use this tool, but it's just a tool. You don't see that messaging at a conference. Yeah, sometimes it's problematic. And I deeply am empathetic for people. I spent easily $300,000, easily, searching. And it wasn't until the last few years that I really dialed it in and, started to really not only not identify with being chronically ill or being a cancer survivor, but, now I'm optimizing. Now I'm adding, right? And that's so much more fun. Yes. So much more fun. And I would say to anybody who hears this and be like, oh my God, I'm glad I'm not sick. We are in bodies that are slowly moving towards, everybody's decaying at some rate. So you don't have to wait till you're sick to do these things.
Right.
It's so much easier from a physics standpoint to turn around an object that's not speeding towards crisis than it is to slowly divert your path. Some of these therapies could be so profound for the general public. I always think about that. Could you imagine if like a college student cramming for their boards was like coffee enema, castor oil pack, no alcohol, and sleep hygiene?
Yeah.
Like simple things.
Yeah.
It'd be profound.
I was taking Adderall and whatever else. And it was just that's a whole other issue. Okay. So in wrapping up, I have 2 questions, but could you let me know about the Biomed Center? What is this? Because it's right down the street from me, apparently, if it's in Scottsdale. I've never heard of this. Maybe in passing, but what is it for anybody, including me, who's never really heard about it?
I feel like there's a few centers. We mentioned Dr. Keneally, the Biomed. I think there's a couple other people on my list, Christine Scheffner, that I would say are well equipped to deal with complicated cases. There's a very famous naturopath, Dr. Dixon Thomas, that is at Biomed Center, and he's, world renowned on biological regulatory medicine. Really, biological medicine, it's the greatest view of holism of the body. They're going to look at every piece of data they can get, and then they're going to work with that person's temperament, their constitution, as opposed to treating your labs or treating your disease. And even high-level functional medicine at some point, a lot of times we're treating lab work.
Yeah.
And you can't treat a lab. You really have to take time. They do like a 3-hour intake. They're going to look at things like contact thermometry to see your body's stress response to cold. They're going to look at how your body would heat back up under a stressor, body adipose index to look at intracellular, extracellular ratios of fluid retention. If that fluid ratio is wrong, can the cell take in an IV? Mm-hmm. No. They're going to look at brain mapping. They're going to look at use tools like hyperbaric, transcranial magnetic stim, PEMF therapy, homeopathics, dietary interventions, castor oil packs. And they're going to educate, empower, and inspire. They're not making choices for you. So it's one of the only places I know from my experience that does that. And they teach a course online. They teach a $2,600 certification course, which is 20 hours online, continuing education credits for naturopaths. Yeah. And then there's a weekend that you do, and you go to the Biomed and you get all the therapy, you do all the diagnostics on yourself. So NanoV, singlet oxygen therapy. Before NanoV was NanoV, Tom's I think he's pushing on, he's like late 70s, I think. But he had the original singlet oxygen therapy, from Germany, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So these are things they've been using for decades and decades. And I think the thing that most, shameless self-plug, Dr. Tom's on the Beautifully Broken podcast. So you can see his flavor. You can see his lived experience.
Do you know what episode?
It's what am I at? I'm 179 now. It's 172, 173.
Okay.
We can throw that one in the show notes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm happy to include it if you can send me the link for it, that'd be great.
Yeah, he's a good one. Let's see if I can't do that one now. I'm multitasking. There's also a really great naturopath there, chiropractor, Dr. Drobot. And Dr. Drobot is another profound resource. Same ideology and thought process of medicine. He's excellent. Let's see this. Spiritual healing, Dr. Tom. What episode are you, Dr. Tom? 173.
173. Okay. And we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. And they have a great staff. The staff is they meet you, people are with you, they're present, and they do an equal balance of blood chemistry and Western, as well as all the energetic scans. So it's, wow. I really like it, but there are other places. I'm sure there are other places that operate under similar principles. Because it's right in your backyard, I think you should definitely go check that out.
Absolutely. And I would assume that it's not just cancer. It would be any type of condition to optimize, not even dealing with dis-ease, but for optimization as well. I will let you know how that goes. I'm definitely going to check it out. Okay. So my final question would be, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen? And I guess it's a double question, the most powerful lessons just from all of this experience. It's so beautiful to see you here, to meet you in person and to see you thriving. And I just think people don't always know that it's possible. And I'm just so grateful for you. So, but you had to go through a lot to get to where you are. So what were some of the misconceptions and lessons that you walked away with?
Number one, I'd say going through all this is I was able to probably heal because I let go of the story that life is fair. Life is not fair. We can do all the right things. It cannot work out your way. And that's the truth. So if anybody tells you something different, they are selling you something. We can do all the right things. The thing I'll say is that life is not fair for everybody, which makes it fair for anyone. That's the principle. The big reality is your body can heal from anything. One of my favorite books to give people is called Radical Remission. Go look at people beating stage 4 cancer, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, brain cancer, glioblastoma, stage 4 testicular cancer, and there's thousands of case studies. And they look at the commonalities and the common bonds to which these people share. It's always a state change. It's always removing yourself from the little pond that made you sick. I can't remember who made this quote. Somebody will be like, come on, you got to know that one. But it's going to take a different level of thinking to remove you from the problem where you're struggling today. You got to shift your mindset. And so a lot of times that's changing where you're at.
Yeah.
I think we take for granted the power people have over us and the power of the bonds that are in our immediate circle. It's like that is so powerful. Who are you spending your time with? Who has access to you? Do they need to have access to you? Is that a story you're telling yourself? Like, look at those bonds, because I always want to change it up. I was like, I want to make new friends. I want to come into new circles. I don't want to be in the biohacking space, or I don't want to be in the conscious community. I get bored. I'm like, this is weird. I don't want to label anymore. I want to keep growing. So I always want to surround myself with new experiences and new trainings. And I think that growth mindset is paramount to healing. What I would say is the most important thing going through cancer is you have to be curious. If you look at every scan and every MRI and every blood test and you're just waiting on that ledge of what if, it's a shitty way to live.
Yeah.
And that'll take a toll on you. You don't need that toll, especially not when your immune system is trying to reprogram and repattern. If I could say one thing, it's the energy behind the action of everything you do. How do you open the refrigerator? How do you do your laundry? How do you make your bed? How do you hug somebody? How do you cook food for another human being? How do you speak into the phone? How do you answer the phone to a telemarketer? It's like every embodied moment in this human body is a gift. If you just want to do the important ones, or just want to think when you're on camera or in the spotlight or when people are seeing you to save, I think there's a energetic toss to that. I just think it's energy behind the action. I am reminded daily what a gift life is, and that sometimes it amazes me. I was like, how do people not break? I've had many times I'm like, holy shit, the veil is thin. I was like, I remember one time when I was really, really young, I was like, wait, we're dying? Like, I remember it hit me like a wall one day. I was like, wait, I'm not going to exist one day? What is that? Tell me about that. Nobody fucking knows. And that's scary shit. So I always give praise for people. I'm like, great job holding it together today, putting on clothes, showing up and being a contribution when you're on a rock spinning around a ball of fire in the middle of nowhere. You did a great job today holding your shit together. It's comical and scary, but it's amazing that we're here to sum it all up, because I will sum it all up. Whether you have faith in what's next or you don't, I think there's no greater act of strength and defiance to at least show up in service for another human being when you're unsure of everything. What a superpower. In the shaking your fist at the great unknowing of what comes next, you're like, I'm going to be a kind person. I'm going to help other people in spite of my not knowing. That's a godlike quality. There is therapy and there's medicine in that attitude.
Absolutely. And, to kind of add to it, it's who are we being? It's great to do a lot of these things, but who are we being, and the intention? Is it love-based? Is it fear-based? Are we working out because we want to be stronger, or because I don't want to be fat, or I hate myself? Just the intention behind why we're doing certain things, even if it's a healthy or good activity, that is something that I think a lot of people are missing. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And finally, how can people find you and the podcast? Because you're just so amazing. I'm glad I got to spend time getting to know you better today. I'm sure our paths will cross at some point in the future, but I've learned a lot. I'm really excited to check out the Biomed Center. So You have a lot of value to add. And I know that you're such an amazing example for so many people. And you just reminded me to be grateful for my life. And yeah, it's crazy sometimes, but here we are. So thank you for that. So yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, I hang out on YouTube and Instagram are the social platforms where I put a lot of content, and it's beautifully-broken.world on YouTube. Same is Instagram. And then I put out a podcast every Monday called The Beautifully Broken Podcast on Spotify and Apple, and that's 5 years in and still growing strong. I love it. Conversations just like this. I learned so much. Whether it's getting an opportunity to like re-examine my story and be like, oh, do I need to move on from that narrative? Or it's asking other people. You know, I just interviewed this woman who was Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay and Susie Ormond and Greg Braden's like she did all their books and courses for them, like from the beginning. And I was like, oh my God, you're like, you're drinking from like this spiritual fire hose. What was that like? I mean, and I just was like, you would never, unless we did podcasts, we would never get to, there's no course you can do this. It is like, for me, podcasting is like the greatest teacher in the whole world, if you allow it to be. So I love doing it. I hope one day I can do just the podcast and just continue to learn because I really enjoy it. We'll see. Yeah, I'm planning on doing the long haul. So I'm 5 years in. Well, there's no plan to stop that.
I love it. That's because a lot of people give up. And it's clear that you love it. And I can't wait to check it out myself. Thank you again for being here. I am so grateful and I hope you all enjoyed.
Thank you.
I love some citrine. And one of my favorite lines that they carry is Tata Harper. I've used this line for years. And my all-time favorite product that Tata Harper makes is the Regenerating Cleanser. It's like this pinkish color. It's exfoliating. It smells so good. And I love to use that almost every day, but definitely on nights where I wear makeup. That's my go-to cleanser. It's incredible. But I want to share some other favorites that I've discovered. And one is the Resurfacing Body Serum. Love to use it by itself. And then I also love the Revitalizing Body Oil. So on their own, they're both great, but I found if I mix them together and put it on the skin, I love how that feels. So my code Ashley Taylor Wellness saves 10% at Citrine, and it includes the line Tata Harper. Normally their code only saves on your first order, but for my audience, they have been so generous and they will apply that discount to all orders. So definitely make sure to check it out. Link is in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and leave a review, ideally a 5-star review if you loved it. All of this is free of charge and really helps me to be able to run the podcast. If you take a screenshot and tag me, I'll repost you and shout you out on Instagram. So tag Ashley Taylor Wellness and High Maintenance Hippie podcast. If you have any feedback or guests that you'd like to have, I would love to hear from you so that I'm not just talking at you. I really want to deliver things that are valuable. So send me an email with any feedback, suggestions, or ideas for guests at ashley@ashleytaylorwellness.com. And I will leave you with a disclaimer. Please know that this is not medical advice or replacement for seeking medical care. Everything discussed on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Always consult with your medical provider before making any changes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.